Well, a warm and pleasant good evening. I'm Dave Morris from the Oklahoman's video studios. Here at Sheridan and Robinson, we have finally made it to game night. The Oklahoma City Thunder kicking off the 2015-2016 season right down the street at Chesapeake Energy Arena, hosting the Spurs tonight. For the next 30 minutes, we will be talking Thunder and Spurs, and I'm joined now by the Oklahoman's Barry Tramel and Mike Sherman, columnist and sports editor for the Oklahoman. Gentlemen, finally we have a game to talk about.
It's been a long, hot summer.
It has been a long, hot summer.
No playoffs means the season ends abruptly, and you got 6 to 8 weeks of extra summer, and nobody liked that a bit. So I think along with everybody in Oklahoma, say let's play ball.
Mike, it's game 1 of 82. It's only game 1 of 82, but as these two teams well know at the end of last season, one game among 82 can actually make a pretty big difference.
Oh yeah, I mean, we kept tracing it back to how the Thunder lost its chance to get in the playoffs. Of course, we all went back to the New Orleans Pelicans game here in the arena where the Brow hit that big three-point shot. There was lots of chances, lots of missed opportunities for the Thunder last year, in spite of a great effort by Westbrook. So what's going to be neat to see is just how different the team is. I mean, that's the thing I'm looking forward to measuring, just how different the whole experience it is with, of course, the new coach, Billy Donovan.
Different lineup, different roster for the Thunder. Who knows how they mesh together. And they play the Spurs tonight, who have a lot of familiar faces, but they also have a new addition with LaMarcus Aldridge. But before we get into rosters, getting back to that one game for the Spurs that made a difference in playoff seeding, and Barry, we're looking 82 games away at different playoff seedings this year. That's new. Can you kind of describe what the league is doing?
Well, the league has kept division scheduling, but it's gotten rid of division standings,
which
basically.
To me makes a whole lot of sense. In fact, when you look at the paper today, you guys did a great job of running East and West conferences. After last night's season openers.
Right. So it's 1 through 8. In the past, division winners got preferential seeding. Were guaranteed in the past the top 3. They changed it to top 4. Eventually top 5. Now you're not guaranteed anything. If you want to hang up a banner, go ahead. But the top 8 teams in the West, top 8 teams in the East are seeded strictly by record. So no more Northwest Division for the Thunder.
What are they going to do with those banners hanging from the in the arena?
Sam Presti loves them. I think he may. I think he'll keep hanging them. I mean,
it's a matter of pride, sure.
I mean, I think Thunder will keep their own standings, and for all I know, the league will still hand out trophies for that or whatever they've been handing out.
Banners.
You just don't get any credit for it.
But it does seem to make a whole lot of sense once you get to April and May. That it should be seeded that way versus division standing winners.
Well, the only thing I would say is, I think it's fine, but why continue the division scheduling? It's not like
that was always done for geographic reasons.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and the Thunder's in a geographic division with Minnesota and Portland, for crying out loud. Who's next? Havana and Guam. So
Havana would be fun, right?
Well, I mean, we now actually could get there without alienating the government. But
I've been with you to Little Havana and Miami, in fact.
Well, that's true, and it's probably a lot like the big Havana. But to me, I think the next progression will be straightening out the schedule, where it's balanced schedule. Everybody just plays a rotating type schedule with no division declarations at all.
Mike, that'd make the most sense, though, right?
Well, I think the next step is to rearrange the whole alignment. I mean, this is an invitation. We have the mighty Mississippi is a problem. You got teams on this side of the mighty Mississippi in the East, don't you, Barry? I mean,
you got three cities right on the Mississippi River that are in the West: New Orleans, Memphis, Minneapolis. And
you can flip a couple.
Yeah, but who are you moving over? The problem is there's still more teams in the eastern U.S. than there are in the West.
The West has dominated for several years now. Is this something that they could look at for parity?
Well, they could. A lot of people just say, go ahead and schedule East and West, but just seed everybody 1 through 16 regardless of geography. So that's the most prevailing argument out there. Most people don't want to do it, and I would hate it because of rivalries. I think it's cool when the Thunder plays the Grizzlies year after year in the playoffs. When they play the Spurs, as they have 2 out of 3 years from 12 to 14 in the West Finals. So I like it when you build up traditional rivalries, and that happens in the playoffs. If you go to 1/16, you might play the Spurs once every 6 or 7 years. Anybody really excited to play Toronto?
Depends on how good Toronto is and who's on the roster.
Not to keep beating the realignment drum, but There's talk that Milwaukee, I don't know, what is the latest, Barry, about Milwaukee getting a new arena? And if they don't, where might they go? Back to Seattle. The NBA goes back to Seattle. If that happens, that could really trigger, I think, a hard look at realignment. Don't know if it's going to do. Usually that'll get people on the ball in Milwaukee, try to keep the Bucks.
Talking with Mike Sherman and Barry Tramel a couple of hours before the Thunder kick off the season down at Chesapeake Energy Arena. And we mentioned this was a highly anticipated season opener, Barry, but perhaps not the most anticipated season opener for the Thunder. That's probably year one, right?
In my opinion, yes. Actually, a lot of people have disagreed with me this week when we've discussed that very question. A lot of people say this is the most anticipated. Might have been November, October of 2012, coming off the NBA Finals when they looked like the NBA favorite. But then 3 days before the season opener, James Harden gets traded. That took a little wind out of the sails. So it's either year one or right now. I just think the fact that we actually had an NBA team that was permanent, that was ours, that was pulling out a shingle at the then Ford Center, to me that was the most anticipated situation. But the team stunk and we knew it.
Yes.
This team do not stink.
Yes. Name the starting five from that night, Barry, and then we'll do some downgrading of your anticipation.
Earl Watson.
I'm guessing Barry's going to be able to pull this off.
And I think I'm going to fail. But Earl Watson, Johan Petro.
That's not a gas station. That's an NBA player.
Kevin Durant, Damian Wilkins, and Chris Wilcox. Did I get it?
I think
I'm
so.
guessing.
I think so. There goes your anticipation, right? Listen, who's going to start? Who's going to start tonight for the Thunder? I think we know that.
You may start with Andre Roberson.
Well,
that might make my case better.
Might, but keep going.
Steven Adams, a solid guy.
He's starting slow. Keep going.
And then three guys that seem to be okay at their craft.
Dave, that's why this is the most anticipated. Think about it. The pent-up Thunder hunger. Barry got us going down this road. We were talking about what story we're going to put on page one, and he said I think it's a fan story. He's right. So you have no playoffs last year. You have a new coach. You have Durant coming back, and you have this pent-up. All of that creating this pent-up anticipation. To me, it's not even close. This is the most anticipated Thunder opener ever.
Should be good stuff. Around 3 o'clock, I drove by the Skirvin Hilton. Fans were already lined up outside on the sidewalks, as they always do when the visiting team stays there. They were waiting to see the Spurs, and there's a live look outside Chesapeake Energy Arena as we speak. That shot from the Myriad Gardens back towards the arena. But the Spurs are in town tonight, and Barry, you touched on this earlier this week in a column and a video that you did with Jenny Carlson. What are you looking forward to most from the Spurs? It's the coach.
Well, I mean, Gregg Popovich is my favorite coach in the NBA. I love talking to him. He makes you work because if you ask a bad question, he's
going to
not
bounce you, right?
Well, or that, or just blow you off. That's the way it ought to be. You know, it's not his job to make our bad questions presentable.
It's not a half dozen talk about.
Right.
It's an actual.
If you ask him a good question, he will give you a really good answer.
What does Popovich consider a good question? What would be a good question
What
for
was
him
that
tonight?
question you asked him when he patted Joe on the rear?
I don't have any idea.
Come on.
That's become somewhat folklore there.
Well, now we're getting some inside information. What do you mean, Mike?
Exactly. Come on, tell the story.
Pop likes questions that sort of go beyond the surface. If you ask him about, the value of field goal percentage, he's going to say, yeah, it's nice to shoot a high percentage. But if you ask him, how do you keep Russell Westbrook, from driving in the paint when Kendrick Perkins is in the game setting screens? He might say something about what you have to do to balance that out. He's a basketball lover. And he likes it when people want to really talk basketball on some kind of serious level.
You mentioned Kendrick Perkins. He got off to a hot start last night. Who saw that coming, right?
I missed the big fella already. 5 for 5 last night.
He was outscoring Anthony Davis there at the beginning.
I miss him already.
You mentioned the starting lineup and Roberson and Popovich breaking down X's and O's, but you actually got a pretty good answer from Billy Donovan describing the Thunder's lineup when Roberson's in there.
Well, here's the deal. The Thunder's more than willing to bench Andre Roberson, just as soon as somebody gives them a good reason to do it. And right now, all the data says the Thunder, not just the best starting lineup, the best lineup period is when Andre Roberson and Steven Adams play with the big three. That's the best lineup, and that was last season, and that was the tail end of 13-14 as well, when Tabo and Perk were hurt for a while at the end of the year, and Adams and Andre Roberson started. It just works well. Why? You sort of have to surmise part of it, but look what Andre Roberson does. He doesn't take any shots away from the big guys. Dion Waiters would take shots away from the big guys. Andre Roberson can guard whoever you want to on the floor. So Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, it's not like they take plays off defensively, but they're not working their butt off every possession on the defensive end. Andre Roberson's doing it for him.
It makes a big difference when Westbrook doesn't have to guard the big guy on the other team.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
There's one caveat, of course, and that is not putting him in the corner. Barry, you wrote this.
Yeah.
But there's a problem. The other team doesn't really have to guard Andre Roberson. I mean, they don't. And so that means that Tony Parker, who's obviously the weak link defensively for the Spurs, and they have to shade things around. It's going to be interesting to see with LaMarcus Aldridge out there and how that changes. But you can put Tony Parker or somebody else that's not really much of a defender on Andre Roberson. How does the Thunder counter that? Backdoor cuts, things like that. And that's where things started grinding to a halt. It changed, I think, a lot. It'd be interesting to look at this. You know, they had Perk and Andre Roberson out there. They had two guys that they wanted to play a lot, and neither of them had to be guarded. So that's why you needed Russ to play hero ball. I mean, I always love the criticism of Russ, like, oh, he's just playing hero ball. Well, what was your other idea? You know, pass the ball to those two guys and let one of them try to go one-on-one?
At the end of the day, who do you want taking that shot? You want Russ.
Right.
Versus the other two, for
We're
sure.
going to find out about Billy Donovan.
Right.
You know, we're going to find out. He's putting the same guys. You wrote this. Great, Barry. He's putting the same guys out there on the court, more or less. How does he use them? We'll find out what kind of, what is it? What was the key phrase that Presti put in or that was in the Thunder press release announcing Billy Donovan?
Tactical competence.
Yeah, we're going to find out about Billy Donovan's tactical competence right quick.
Anytime Presti speaks, you almost have to break out, you know, the Google, you know, what does that mean? That's
decoder ring. I say we need a decoder ring.
Mike mentioned Barry's column on the front page of the sports section today, and Barry explained this a little bit. Can Donovan achieve iconic status in Oklahoma City? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, this is a guy, he turned 50 this calendar year in May, I think. He turned 50 years old, and he started a new phase of his life, but it's already been quite a career in basketball.
Storied career, sure.
I mean, at Providence, he's an icon.
Final Four.
Final Four, 1987 Friars, a small school, not thought of. He shoots them to the Final Four.
Still not thought of.
He goes into coaching, goes down to Florida, which is an okay job, but still a football school. Spends 19 years building that into a national power, 4 Final Fours, 2 NCAA titles, and unlike a coach at virtually every other football school that does well, he doesn't leave. He stays there, and now he's a revered figure in...
Tried to leave once, right? Orlando.
He left for 3 days, but he came back. So Gainesville, Florida, revered figure, but now at the age of 50, he's starting a new chapter in his life. He's become an icon at Providence. He's become an icon at Florida. He can come here. He's going to be an icon if he delivers this team to an NBA championship.
Well, and that is kind of the bar, if you will, this year. It is kind of championship, given the roster that he has. First-year head coach, Steve Kerr, we saw him do it last year, but there's a difference between Kerr and Donovan just based on NBA experience, right?
It's a big difference, and not because Billy Donovan doesn't have any. Of course, he does have a little bit playing for the Knicks and more or less sitting the bench for a little bit. But Steve Kerr had a courtside seat, great announcer. You know, I think he was just a terrific broadcaster.
He was a fantastic
Sitting
announcer.
right there, you know, and really observing the games, talking to people all the time. That transition, I think, made it a little bit easier. But the idea of leading men, leading young men, coaching by cooperation, he hadn't tried it before. Proved that he could. Look at the assistant coaches he put around him, Ron Adams. And then who's the guy?
Alvin Gentry.
Alvin Gentry. And so I think the big key for Billy Donovan, and the Thunder's taking care of this. They got Mo Cheeks to come back. They got Monty Williams to come to Oklahoma City. He surrounded himself with guys with NBA experience. So that objection is countered. Very few, if any, college coaches have ever walked into an NBA job like this one. What'd you say, Joe Mulaney?
Yeah, took over the Lakers in the late 60s, you know, when they had Wilt and Jerry West and Elgin Baylor. But Most college coaches don't get a job like this. Doesn't happen. However, NBA history is full of guys who had never been a head coach before at the NBA level and won a title immediately. It does happen, and sometimes, I mean, it's obvious why it happens. You got a talented roster, you got a good team, you had a good coach. Scotty Brooks was a good coach, sure. But sometimes you just need a new voice. And that's, you need it on all kinds of businesses, all kinds of industries. That includes basketball.
Thunder and Spurs tonight, tip-off 7 p.m. over at Chesapeake Energy Arena. You can watch the game if you're not at the arena on ESPN. You can follow us on newsok.com. Our staff will be tweeting throughout the game, and of course we'll have post-game coverage on newsok.com. Plenty of coverage tomorrow on the Oklahoman as well. Now, the NBA season actually tipped off last night. We mentioned Steve Kerr, and apparently he was holding back Steph Curry, who went for 24 points or something in the first quarter and 40 for the game. Who should we be looking for this season? Another breakout season for Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, LeBron James. Who are you guys looking for this year?
Well, I mean, Anthony Davis, not last night notwithstanding.
He struggled last night.
That's he's 4 of 20. However, I mean, he's the breakout star. He's the guy that's moved himself into the level of LeBron and Durant as the best players in the game.
And they showed a picture of him last night from like high school or junior high or whatever to what he is now. I mean, he's a man.
He's a total load. We saw him, twice last year at the arena. I mean, he's just an unbelievable player. And he came into the league as a shot blocking defender demon. And now, he's making 17-footers like Marcus Aldridge and passing like an accomplished big man and dominating the boards. I mean, he's just a phenomenal player. So he rivals Durant and LeBron for best player in the league. I don't think his team's going to be good enough for him to challenge his MVP, though. I'm worried about New Orleans' health. I don't think they can repeat last season.
A cautionary tale for him, of course, though, is the Serge Ibaka syndrome. I mean, he has grown his offensive game and expanded it further and further out. And I don't think the Pelicans want him falling in love with a three-point shot. He's expanded his range up to that, but last night a tough shooting thing. I think he was out there drifting around a little bit further out. And so if he all of a sudden wants to expand his game out to the three-point range, maybe you lose a little bit of Anthony Davis. Something to keep your eye on. Barry and I, as far as teams, we kind of agree on this one. I looked in our grid. The Boston Celtics in the East, less resistance, of course, but Brad Stevens.
That was another college coach that went to the pros recently.
And a guy that there was great speculation, if Scott Brooks had not agreed and the Thunder had not agreed to that contract
timing-wise
extension
perhaps.
Right after they went to the NBA Finals, that's when Brad Stevens got hired by the Celtics. Is it timing or just a year later?
I think that's right.
Yeah, and so and there's Presti really admires Brad Stevens. They got a great relationship. So that might have been the Thunder's coach. Instead, of course, Scott Brooks signs. Thunder goes on to have these successful, although aborted lots of ways by injuries. But the Boston Celtics, they came in here and gave the Thunder all they needed. They made the playoffs. That guy's a heck of a coach, and I look for them to climb up the Eastern standings. Of course, the East is weak.
Who do you have in the East? Cleveland, Atlanta?
Cleveland, Chicago are clearly the two top teams. I expect Atlanta finished
in a decent game last night.
Atlanta was the number 1 seed last year. I expect the Hawks to decline. They're going to miss DeMarre Carroll. A lot of people like Toronto, but they're a little bit of a psychological mess. I'm not big on them. And the other team is Milwaukee. Added Greg Monroe to a 41-41 team. A lot of young talent. If they can find somebody that can shoot, they could be dangerous. But it's going to be hard to find somebody that can shoot.
Your favorite, Stephen A., likes Westbrook for MVP. Who do you guys like for MVP?
Well, I got a sad story to tell about that. We've had our picks in there, and Darnell, and I let him talk me out of it. Of course, Barry says, as long as LeBron James is in the league, LeBron James is the MVP. So that's who I end up going with. But I put Russell Westbrook as the MVP of this Thunder team. There's a really good look at his passing on Grantland today. Really great analysis of Westbrook. I think he's going to have a phenomenal year. I think, having Kevin Durant to kick it out to, shooters on every side, an offensive big that can roll to the basket to go with the offensive big who can pop like Ibaka. It's just all set up for Westbrook. Less pressure on him, maybe some running mates on the wings. They're loaded. And I think the big beneficiary of all of these moves is Russell Westbrook. less wear and tear. Look out for him to be the zealous defender maybe that we saw way back in the Pac-10 days.
He's going back in the MVP for you, Barry.
I got LeBron. I mean, if you're gonna call it the MVP award, follow the name.
Do you think they should change that, much like conference and division seedings, to after the playoffs?
Well, I think.
Or maybe before the finals.
They do it this way because of marketing and PR. It's a great. It keeps
NBA's pretty good at marketing.
It keeps
and PR.
a lot of juices flowing. It puts a lot of emphasis on the regular season. If you're the Thunder and you got a new coach, we're excited about the regular season. If you got LaMarcus Aldridge, but if you're the Clippers or if you're the Grizzlies or the Warriors or the Rockets, the truth of the matter is it's entertainment, but the regular season's not particularly important. They're going to be in the playoffs. They're just going to be fighting at the end for who's going to win 55 games and who's going to win 56, who's going to be third and who's going to be sixth. So you got to keep some semblance of import to the regular season. I think that's why they do it with the MVP and all the awards.
Just a few minutes left here in the Oklahoman's Thunder pregame show, if you will. Talking with Barry Tramel and Mike Sherman. The Thunder kicks off at 7 p.m. tonight at Chesapeake Energy Arena versus the Spurs. We are a newspaper after all. Let's talk storylines. Biggest storyline for the Thunder this season.
Well, we made it all this way. Have we said the name Kevin Durant yet? I think
Yes.
we have. We've said not nearly enough. He's the storyline. He's a storyline for the NBA in lots of ways. I'm interested to see, all the talk, LeBron's first free agent season, the very first one, and then he went to Miami. I've seen people that say this is going to rival that. And for this reason, not because Kevin is superior to LeBron James, but because of all the teams lining up thinking they have a shot at him.
The Lakers.
Whoever. Heat. Money out there. Probably Houston. Lots of people out there with money. And Kevin and Kevin's comeback. The thing about his foot. How's he doing? The idea that he's going to be contending for a scoring title. This is a small market, big market. Every time he goes to these cities, he's going to be asked about it. I'm not sure how much he's going to say. So anyway, the biggest storyline is, I'm wondering, is it his foot or his future? And I'm actually going to go with his foot. I'm thinking we're taking some things for granted, that everything's going to be great with this foot fracture. And then, they put a screw in it. If you ever go and Google it up sometime and look for the x-ray, it looks like one of my Lowe's projects. I go to Lowe's and screw's not supposed to go in that way. It's supposed to go in this way or something. Doesn't look good, but he's playing well. And he says he's tired of answering questions about it.
I'm sure he is.
Now it's just going to be about his play, and that's going to be fun to watch. Kevin Durant's a story.
Well, I got to admit, a lot of people I talk to, they say the same thing, if they can stay healthy. Barry, biggest storyline for the Thunder?
Well, I think it's trying to win a title in this pivotal year. Billy Donovan's first year, Kevin Durant's last year of his contract. Everybody calls it the most important season in Thunder history. I guess it is because of that impending free agency. Everyone seems to think that a championship would solidify Durant staying. I personally,
what do you think?
I don't think it's that big of a point to win the title. You could make the argument that not winning the title could entice him to stay.
Keeps him hungry?
Keeps him hungry, wants to finish a job. I do think it's important that the Thunder show that it's a contender. And, sometimes you just don't win. Sometimes bad things happen to you. But if the Thunder can show under Billy Donovan that it's going to be a contender for a good long time, I think that's going to be enough to keep Kevin Durant in town.
Dave, here's how we know that's a big storyline. Right now, the most viewed story on News OK has been this week, in spite of huge important news, has been a look at the Kevin Durant statements about free agents over time. People are looking at that. And he added another one today in which he was asked about the importance of continuity, and he went in on it and talked about Sam Presti, the ownership here, how important, how impatient they've been. And if you look around the league, there's not a lot of continuity. No. It's basically San Antonio and Oklahoma City. And Barry, what's the next? Where's the next home of continuity?
It might be Chicago.
Miami.
It might be Chicago.
Spoelstra's been there, 8-9 years now?
8 years for Spoelstra.
But it's not it's not common across the league. And in Kevin Durant's hometown, it's not prevalent there. Los Angeles, are you kidding me? I mean, I guess Doc Rivers has stabled the ship or solidified the ship, but the Lakers have no continuity. So I think that's going to be, Kevin, what he says, he values that stuff.
Well, Kobe's coached the Lakers for 20 years now, so.
True that.
Let me, you mentioned that article on newsok.com, and I believe it started in January when he told Spike Lee Oklahoma City's a good fit for him. Plenty of coverage from the Thunder can be found on newsok.com. One last question, and this is kind of a behind-the-scenes type thing, but you do a good job on social media asking people for headlines. You do it for OU, OSU, and you've done it for the Thunder. How can people participate in our coverage?
Well, we do the what's the headline hashtag, and if people, during games, sometimes during games they hit me up. They beat me to the prompt.
Sure.
So late in games, especially big games, we'll do it again tonight. We'll hit a hashtag and we'll say, okay, it's time to play what's the headline. And if your headline is better than ours, we'll use it and send you a commemorative copy of it.
Nice.
We do a slick copy and we.
It's not just a firm handshake or a
Nope.
Greg Popovich pat on the behind to Barry.
Nope.
No, it's an actual picture.
And it's time, and people. What's interesting about it is, it's become a bit of a franchise for us. I'm seeing people on Sunday, and I see my priest at church, and he's arguing, saying, "I had a better one than what you guys had."
It's great.
And then during the Thunder playoffs, people really hit their strides. They get some practice. Our staff has gotten better because they're using their predictions as headlines in Saturday's paper. So it's a heck of a lot of fun, and we'll be doing it again tonight.
All right, fantastic. Barry Tramel, Mike Sherman, I know you guys got to go to work. Gentlemen, I appreciate your time tonight. Thunder host the Spurs over at Chesapeake Energy Arena. Tips off, the game time's at 7. It'll tip off after 7. You can watch it on ESPN. And again, full coverage in the Oklahoman and online at newsok.com. That'll do it for us here at the Oklahoman's Video Studio.